The impact of flexible work arrangements has been of interest since the 1970s. Claire, I'm wondering if you could provide us a definition of flexible work arrangements and perhaps some common examples of what it looks like in the workplace.
Sure. In this study, we were particularly concerned at looking at where employees are given some degree of choice over their working arrangements. So that might be where they work, when they work, and how much they work. And essentially, this choice is designed to help facilitate work-life balance for people to be able to balance work and non-work activities more effectively. So some examples of that might be people working remotely, maybe working from home 1 or 2 days a week or on an ad hoc basis, people varying the hours at which they carry out work, perhaps coming in a little bit earlier, finishing a little bit earlier, working at different times to suit other aspects of their life, or perhaps quite commonly part-time working where people actually reduce from a full-time commitment.
So a lot of different arrangements available. Because of the prevalence of flexible work arrangements in the workplace, it's assumed that there is a business case for this kind of arrangement. What did you find in your study?
Well, what we did was we took a look at all of the accumulated evidence on flexible working to examine all the studies we could find to see what kind of results that were coming out when trying to identify the link with performance. Now, we found many studies that had positive links with performance, both individual performance and organisational performance, but we also did find quite a considerable number of studies that either showed no effect or in some cases a negative effect on employment, on performance in the workplace.
Okay, so I think we'll come back to that piece a little bit further on, but just in terms of the organisational and individual elements, what were the differences there? Can you speak to perhaps the organisational one first?
Yes, there are some studies which show links with organisational performance, but I think in some senses organisational performance, it's harder to identify a link between a change to the way in which employees work and an outcome like profit or return on investment to actually trace what is happening in an organisation. It's perhaps rather easier to identify, and generally speaking the results are more positive when looking at individual performance. When an individual changes the way in which they work, what is the outcome for performance when they work in a different way?
So perhaps just to focus in on then the individual element, what were some of the findings there in terms of impact on performance?
Yes, a lot of the studies that we examined in this paper were looking at sometimes directly performance, but sometimes indirect aspects of performance. So, for example, we found quite a significant body of evidence which showed positive results on things like job satisfaction, organisational commitment, and particularly things like absenteeism. So individuals may have been more productive because they were absent less from work because of the degree of flexibility that was available to them.
Right. And was there anything else there around the job satisfaction, employee commitment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we found that taking this evidence together, I think that it demonstrates really the power of giving employees some degree of choice on how they do their work. That, I think, the evidence suggests is very powerful in creating a commitment to an organisation, particularly when the flexible working arrangement may be very specifically tailored to the needs of the individual.
So it sounds like it's more the perception of availability is more of a strength. Whether or not they take it up has less impact on performance.
Well, I think there is an impact where employees take it up, but I think there is also a more general impact which is brought about by employees saying, I can exercise some choice at some point in the future when they may wish to work in a different way. Things in their lives may have changed, they may have caring commitments, they may have leisure pursuits that they want to pursue. There may be different aspects of their life which mean that they want to be able to change the way in which they work, and it's that choice element or the availability of choice which I think is the powerful one.
Okay, so there's an indirect perhaps influence on performance, but in your paper you talk about some of the issues around how the subject has been researched, and you've got some interesting ideas about what could be done to improve looking at the subject?
Yes, I think that when we looked at this body of evidence, I think it'd be fair to say that the body of evidence is not conclusive. And so we looked a little bit more closely at the studies and found that actually many of the studies have been conducted in different ways, have been designed in different ways, and as a result, they don't really compare like with like. For example, you find that there would be some, particularly of the big scale studies, which try to measure the impact between availability of a policy and organisational performance. There will be other studies that focus on only looking at flexible workers, i.e. the people who have taken advantage of the policy, and examining how their performance contributes to organisational performance. There are also differences in studies where perhaps there hasn't always been very much consideration to the degree of flexible working. So you might find the performance of somebody who's working part-time but working on, say, 90% of a full-time contract being grouped together with somebody who's maybe only on 40 or 50% of a full-time contract. And I think if we just think through what that's likely to mean for people's presence in the workplace, it's almost inevitable that a 90% and a half-time contract is likely to have a different impact on performance.
So all those differences really cloud the issue about whether flexible work arrangements lead to performance. So the business case is clearly a question mark.
Yes, I mean, there are some studies which do provide good evidence of a link between them. I think it's when you take the body of evidence, because of the different ways in which the studies have tackled the topic, it means that it's hard to say conclusively this body of evidence suggests that there is a firm business case.
Okay, so some more research to be done in this area.
Absolutely. I think there's a need for greater clarity in the field and for studies to be more refined so that they are able to compare like with like when you take studies together.
We look forward to the results. Thank you.